The symbolism of the game of snakes and ladders. Snakes and Ladders is a family board game, played with counters and a dice. The player starts on square 1. The dice is then thrown and the player moves his counter horizontally, from left to right and then from right to left, slowly ascending the numbered squares on the board, moving the number of squares shown on the dice each time. If he lands on the bottom of a ladder, he can then move his counter to the top of the ladder. If he lands at the top of a snake, he must slide all the way to the bottom of the snake. In the USA, it is simply treated as a game of chance for children, and has even been renamed to Chutes and Ladders, and all meaning has been lost. But Snakes and Ladders came to the UK during the times of British colonial India and was adapted from the Indian game Gyan Chaupur, an exciting, far more symbolic, mystical game with ancient roots that not only has continued in popularity but is undergoing a massive revival in India. Furthermore, it is not the only game that has a mystic meaning and originated in ancient India. Pachisi, known in English as Ludo and Parcheesi, and chess did too. An overview of Gyan Chaupur. In its present form, Gyan Chaupur means game or path of wisdom. It is not a competitive game. Its objective is to lead its players via a series of lessons from the lowest to the highest plane of existence, the path of ascension, the ups, ladders and downs, snakes of one's progress. The dice represents fate or chance, not destiny. In essence, Gyan Chaupur describes the spiritual path. Instead of going round a clock, one travels a board. Each square, between 72 and 124 in number, is intended to teach a person what they might encounter and how to handle it. The spiritual path we have used on our site and in these videos uses the 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn and winter. But this largely Greek-European symbolism has its exact correspondences in the 4 famous ashramas of Hindu life: Brahmachari, student life; Grihastha, household life; Vanaprastha, retired life; and Sannyasa, renounced life. We explain this in our video, Introduction to the Spiritual Path. Each ashram stage is represented by 1 or more rows on the board, and explanations given of what to expect at that stage. In olden times, people would play with treasured objects as their pieces. It was believed that through an object that had deep personal meaning, the person would gain greater insight. The history of Gyan Chaupur. Gyan Chaupur can be traced back to Vedic or even the proto-historic Harappan period. Variants include Moksha Patar, Board of Enlightenment, Parampada Sopanam, steps to the highest place, the ladder to salvation, and Gayan Baz. In Andhra Pradesh, Snakes and Ladders is still played today under the name of Vaikantapali. Gayan Chapur also has its roots in a game invented by Jain saints in Western India. Its purpose was to teach karmic theory to young Jains. The movement of players across the board showed the movement of the jiva, soul, across the various lokas, worlds, before finally attaining siddha, enlightenment, to top the game. A player started from the point of complete delusion and worked toward the state of omniscience. But the Hindu Gayan Chapur boards are more sophisticated. Not only do they have more elements, snakes, ladders, text, pictures and boxes, they also differ in their approach to the game. Gayan Chapur was adapted so that it was general purpose, being able to support more than one variant of the spiritual path. There are, as a consequence, many versions of the game: Hindu, Advaitic or Tantric, Buddhist, Jain, Islamic, and Sufi, as in this example, each with its own philosophical lessons. Even spiritual movements like Bhakti, especially its Vaishnava strand, have used the game to convey its ideas to its followers. In essence, it was found that it can transcend philosophical boundaries due to its ability to make apparent, abstruse concepts of mystic thought. It was possibly the first attempt to find a way of showing the correspondences between concepts and symbols in game form, and it was, as a consequence, a game played by kings and commoners, children and adults, and Europeans and Indians alike. When the game first became popular in the late 1800s in the UK, for example, the original moral aspects were retained, adapted to Victorian society, and renamed: virtue rewarded and vice punished. This version, Liederspiel, was developed by J.W. Spears and Sohner in Germany in the early 20th century. Author and scholar, the late Harish Johari, was possibly the first to recreate a similar modernized game in India, and he called it the Yoga of Snakes and Arrows, the Leela of self-knowledge. But since then, a number of modern versions have become very popular in India. In the modern recreations, the game has even been made into a computer-based game with which one can interact, so that one can get a definition of chakra, for example, or moksha, or dharma. For example, in one such online game, Square 35 has the word Naraka. Double tapping the square provides an explanation. Naraka interpretation. Naraka is the cleansing experience of a player who has reached the stage where he is not cleansed enough to experience the divine. It is a stage of atonement through suffering. The player is responsible for his actions and must bear the consequences thereof. Yama, the lord of Naraka, is a diva, whose job is to set wrong frequencies right, so that the future evolution of the spirit can take place. Only the American games manufacturers stripped it of all moral, mystic and symbolic lessons and reduced it to a game of chance with 100 squares. Progression and ascension. As in the spiritual path, progress is by ascension. Although the 24-hour clock used in our diagram is of necessity flat, its real shape is more like a corkscrew that Lewis Carroll used in the Alice books, the spiral lights of a Christmas tree, or the path round a mountain, and one is ascending as Dante did in his Divine Comedy. And the board game tries to recreate the same idea: slow ascension in a spiral with occasional faster ascents on finding the ladder of virtuous behaviour, and occasional descents down the snake of vice. So although the moral element is there is no preaching or finger pointing. Nevertheless, although there are 5 ladders, there are 9 snakes. The aim in all the Indian games is the realization of the self and the liberation of the individual soul from the cycle of births. This is defined as a state of bliss, so it is worth aiming for. Ideas incorporated, symbols and concepts. Some of the most beautiful versions of the game are big enough to be able to incorporate a vast array of mystic symbols and concepts. At the top are the gods, angels, avatars, and other spirit beings. Then as you move down, there are palaces of various sorts, then birds as well as flowers and butterflies. Along with these hierarchically arranged symbols, there are the signs of the zodiac: the crab, the scorpion, the twins, Gemini, Leo, Pisces, Virgo, and so on. And perhaps finally the landscape features of the mortal soul: sacred groves, reeds, rushes, streams, and forests. The ladders or stairs then represent virtues, such as generosity, faith, and humility, while the snakes represented vice, such as lust, anger, murder, and theft. The lesson of the game was that a person can attain salvation, moksha, through the virtues, whereas by succumbing to the vices, they will be reborn as lower forms of life. The number of ladders was less than the number of snakes, as a reminder that virtues are much more difficult to attain than to sink into a path of vice.